Good day, everyone, and welcome to another Live with Kevin, or a future episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. I'm so glad you're here, whatever social platform you might happen to be on at this moment. So whatever one you're on, you have the ability to hit the comments, right? And so I'd like for you to comment now, say hello, tell us where you're located. We'd love to know where around the world people are today for our very special episode. And while you're here, I just hope that you will imagine that you're joining my guest and I. You are, in a way. We're all virtual. But I just want you to imagine you're actually with us and having a cup of coffee. So if you've got depending on the time of day for you, it may not be coffee, I suppose. But whatever, that would be comfortable for you to be sitting with us to share your questions, your comments, and your ideas. Because if you do that, not only will we have a better conversation here live, but it will create a better episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. And so if you're wondering about the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, yes, this will eventually be an episode, but everything I've just said won't be on it. But your comments and your ideas and your input will be a part of that podcast. And so, so before we actually start what will be the recording for that, I'm going to do a quick countdown and then I'll dive in. But I'm so glad you're here with us live, and I hope that you will contribute and participate. And again, make sure you say hello and tell us where you're located. So the podcast recording will start in 3, 2, 1. A deep look at what it means to lead. Hopefully that's something you experience here on this podcast often, yet today is different. A leader with 6 decades of experience who is a student of the craft and is also a willing sharer of the craft. He will bring a powerful perspective to our show. So I hope that you will get ready to take some notes and then to take action. I'm excited to introduce him to you in just a second. Welcome to another live episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference, for their teams, their organizations, and the world. If you're listening to this podcast, you could be here live in the future to contribute and participate in that way and get access to this information sooner. And you can get access to all that and learn more about when and how we're doing that by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to do that. And we'd hope and look forward to seeing you here then. Today's episode is brought to you by Remarkable Development Sessions. A Remarkable Development Session is a webinar for a new world. We know that we learn in interaction with others, but in a fractured and increasingly virtual world, the workshop experience has been shifted to a focus on delivering the content, leaving the application to you as an individual. So even if you love learning from webinars, you've likely thought there has to be a better way, a way to make the webinar more and better than it is. If you like that thought and want to get more from your virtual learning experiences, then go to kevineichenberry.com/remarkabledevelopment to learn more and register for an upcoming session on a valuable skill. And with that, it's time for me to bring in our guest. Let me click the magic button and John White joins us. Let me introduce John to you. I have a longer introduction than I sometimes do because I think it's well worth it. So John A. White is our guest today, and the North Central Association of Colleges and Universities called the decade of his leadership at the University of Arkansas transformational, noting significant improvements occurred in all dimensions of the university. During his 6-year service at Georgia Tech as the engineering dean, the college advanced from being ranked 11th to being ranked 3rd by the U.S. News and World Report. Syscon, an engineering consulting firm he co-founded, changed the way material handling systems were designed for manufacturing and distribution from an experience-based to requirements-driven by employing computer-based design and analysis. His leadership of the National Science Foundation's Engineering Directorate resulted in his receipt of its Distinguished Service Award. His experience includes membership on boards of directors for companies like Eastman Chemical, J.B. Hunt Transportation Services, Logility, Motorola Solutions, and the Russell Corporation. He served on a number of societies and councils. I could go on. He's a member of the National Academy of Engineering. He has a bachelor's, master, and doctorate degrees from Arkansas, Virginia Tech, and the Ohio State University. And part of the reason he's here today is he's the author of a brand new book, Why It Matters, Reflections on Practical Leadership. And so, John, with that very lengthy and yet important introduction, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today.
So let's see. We have Istanbul, Ethiopia, Zurich, India, the Bay Area, in Northern California, where I once lived, and I'm sure many more. So all of you that are joining us live, please tell us where you're at. John, it is a pleasure to be with you. And we had the chance to chat for just a few minutes before I hit the Let's Go Live button. So I've got a number of questions, but I really hope that we can just have a conversation. And so I guess, I read more of your introduction, more of your background than I often do for guests, to give people a sense of the breadth and depth of your experience. And what I want to ask is really what led you to write the book? Like, why did you decide to write the book? After all that stuff, you could just say, hey, I'm going to sort of sit back, hang out. Why'd you write the book?
Well, it's probably because of maybe one student I had in class, the last offering of the leadership course that I did at University of Arkansas. Consistently over the offerings of the course, students said it was the most demanding course they had taken. Because I worked them like dogs in the writing and everything, and I graded everything, and gave them a promise that what you say stays with me. No one will see your work other than myself. So I really put them through the traces on writing, and then they said it was the best course they'd taken, which made me feel pretty good. But even more importantly, they said it changed their lives. And I thought, wow. I had taught all these courses I had taught before, had equations all throughout them. I wondered, how in the world am I going to teach a course on leadership without an
There's no equations.
Yeah. So, but then I get to the very end, and of course, the students knew it was going to be my last offering of the course because I was retiring, and they said, would you please write a book and try to capture in the book what's happened in this course. And I thought, oh, well, yeah. But then there was one student who filled out the evaluation of the course, and it was posted. Of course, it was anonymous, but he said, Dr. White said it would be the most demanding course, and it was. He said it would be the best course, and it was. And he said that it would change my life, but it didn't. It saved my life. And I thought, oh my goodness. That's when I knew I had to write the book. And so along came the pandemic, which gave me the perfect opportunity because I was literally hunkered down for 18 months. And my wife couldn't stand for me to just be staring at her for those 18 months, I'm sure. So I decided I'll do it. So I went back, and that's what I did. And out of that came Why It Matters, Reflections on Practical Leadership, because I decided that I would base it really on practices about it's based on my experiences. It's based on experiences of others. And a lot of this is drawn from the guest leaders who met with our class. They weren't to prepare anything. They were just to come. And I asked them to just be brutally honest with the class. I said, we have two rules. What's said here stays here, and there'll be no recording of what you say. And then, oh, by the way, when I got ready to do the book, I had to go back to each of them and say, I know I told you that.
I say this.
I know I told you that, but would you approve? And so every quote that's in the book has been signed off on by those guest leaders. But it ranged from the two of the governors came and met with the class, the attorney general, the military officers, a lot of CEOs. Just it was full range of people. So in the 16 weeks of the semester, 15 of those we had a guest leader come. And for the first 15 minutes to 20 minutes, like you and I did earlier, we would just chat. I would ask some questions. What I was really doing was trying to warm up the class to the guest leader because their titles and responsibilities could be a bit intimidating for the students.
Sure.
But also, I wanted the guest leader to feel comfortable in that setting of the classroom with them. Then I'd turn to the class and I'd say, do you have any questions for our guest? And then that's what drove it, Kevin, were the questions from the kids. And the guest leaders were very transparent. In fact, I think every offering of the course, there would be at least 3 who would be in tears as they would talk about their experiences. I remember in the first offering of the course, one student asked a person who he was a member of the Motorola board of directors, which I was on, and I knew him quite well. And he came and he joined us and said, how do you balance family and career? And he said, it cost me my first marriage. Well, I had no idea. I thought that the person he was married to was his first wife. I didn't know that there'd been so I thought, oh my goodness. And then he said, my second wife, she came out of industry and she understood what the demands are on a corporate CEO. Well, then there was another one who came along, and it was more about midway through the semester. And students wanted to ask this question again. How do you balance family and career? And he said, I'm a failure as a husband. I'm a failure as a father. And no success at work will offset failure at home. I'm the poster child in how not to do it. Well, I knew part of his story. I just wasn't sure how he would answer that question, but he laid it out there. He left our class met on Tuesday evenings. After he was gone, I turned to the class and I said, he'll be in divorce court Thursday for the second time. So then, and you say, well, golly, were they all like that? No. It turns out, like Greg Brown, who was chairman of Motorola, he walked into the class and he said, now I know the syllabus says I'm only supposed to be here until 7:00, but I'm not leaving as long as you've got questions. That plane will not leave the airport unless I'm on it. So I'm here for you. Well, they began. And finally, I mean, it was 8:00 and I said, I'm sorry, Greg, I've got to call this to a halt because I've got some other things I need to do. He came over and he said, I've never had so much fun. He said, can I come back again this semester? I said, Greg, I'm scheduled. I've got all of that. Can I come back next semester? I only do it in the fall. Greg, can I come back next year? And he did. And he came every time I offered the course. And he was as effective as that every time. And yet on that question, how do you balance family and career? I knew the answer to that because his son was in something like over 130 basketball games from junior high through high school, and Greg missed one game. And that's because the game had been rescheduled because of weather out of Schaumburg area there in Chicago, and it conflicted with Greg's appointment to meet with the Israeli prime minister. And so he thought about changing the schedule, and the staff said, it's taken us years to get this. Please do it. So he went. But, I knew that would happen because when he was brought into Motorola and made one of the top leaders within Motorola, they had a dinner for all of the executive team. And he showed up late for that dinner. And he didn't tell the CEO he was going to be late. As soon as he gave his presentation, he left the room and he went to his son's basketball game. And he came back and he came into dinner and people had pretty much finished the salad. He got there for the entree, sat down, and the chairman CEO said, where have you been? He said, well, I've been to my son's basketball game. And then he realized that in the future, maybe I should let people know what I'm going to do.
People know where that's going to be, right? So
yeah.
I know because I've read your book, and we were talking with Dr. John A. White, the author of Why It Matters, Reflections on Practical Leadership. I'm going to ask you a question that you asked all of those guests. And that is, when did you first recognize your leadership abilities?
Now you turned that right around on me, Kevin. Good question.
Yes, I did.
Yes, you did. You know, I think it was in maybe it was in high school, but it was in a very I didn't really associate it with leadership abilities. Um, I'm the child of uh, parents who were teachers, and I was I really studied hard, did well, but when I was a sophomore in high school, I was elected most studious boy. Now, Kevin, I didn't think that was something to strive for. I wanted to be the most popular boy, the best personality, not
Sure.
most studious. So I thought, well, I've got to work on my personality. So I really worked hard. Junior year, I'm elected most studious boy again. Well, but then also, interestingly, came time to nominate people for offices as senior year, the student body president or vice president. And I quickly nominated someone for student body president. And then someone nominated me for student body vice president. Afterwards, several kids came to me and said, why did you nominate? We were going to nominate you for president. Well, Kevin, the truth is, I was afraid I would lose. I was afraid I wouldn't be elected. And my fear of failure caused me to not even try, to dare to try. But then, and oh, by the way, my senior year came along and I was called and they said, you've been elected most popular, best personality, best all around, most likely to succeed, and most studious boy. But you
See,
can
you
only,
can be studious and popular, John.
yeah, yeah. And they said, but you can only have three, so you've got to give up two of those.
Oh.
I said, I'll give up most studious boy, and, and I'll give up most likely to succeed. We'll see what the future turns out to be. But even then, I still wasn't thinking about it in terms of leadership. But I realized that people were starting to pay attention to me a bit more because I was just a nerd, a geek. Uh, Through college, I got very involved, of course, with my fraternity and with the industrial engineering student organization. But leadership really wasn't something that was in my mind at that time. It's after I graduated and went to work there at Tennessee Eastman Company that I realized that people were coming to me and asking about advice. And these, a lot of it were older people. I mean, they'd been around, they're more experienced. I really couldn't quite figure it out. Then the next thing you know, I'm in graduate school, but I got active in the senior chapter of the Institute of Industrial Engineers because I was a tenure track faculty member there while I was working on my master's degree. And I was elected president of the chapter. And it just turned out that people started coming to me and asking things. And I guess it was a recognition that I must have some influence on people that, but Kevin, I'm a terrible administrator. I'm a terrible manager, but I do think I'm an effective leader. I do.
So
Do.
talk about the difference
Yeah.
between being a manager and being a leader
Yeah.
in your mind.
In my mind, the business about the manager was the important things is about the following up with people and seeing how they're. You see, I believed, and it took me a while to learn the difference. That I thought that people would want to be led like I wanted to be led, namely, tell me what the goal is and leave me alone and let me go do it. Because I'm a self starter. I my motivation comes from an intense desire to achieve that. I don't have to be reminded. I don't have to be followed up on. I don't have to be encouraged. It's just there's something in my nature that I just want to do, make a difference, to do good things. And I realized that I wasn't good at. I don't have a lot of patience. I want to get on to the next thing. Once I've got the answer, then let's move on. So there was that engineer about me, which was the problem solver, which tended to be, okay, let's get on to the next problem. But in fact, the implementation of the solution, so key that I needed to be a manager. I needed to follow up to see that there was follow through by individuals. We would achieve the objectives and all of that. But I don't know. I think it was the intellectual challenges of it that uh, caught me, but I just wasn't real good about the other stuff. And then along the lines, someone emphasized to me the importance of being brutally honest with yourself about what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. And it's when I began to identify what I believed my weaknesses were, and I think others would confirm that I recognized that I need to assemble a team around me that are strong where I'm weak. So I needed people who would stay on it like a dog on a bone and just make sure that we finished the thing up. Where I was moving on to the next bone, they still needed to take care of that first bone.
Right.
So that's not a nice, easy way to answer that question, Kevin, but hopefully from that you can get a sense of why I think that there is a difference between management and leadership. I think I am a visionary. Uh, Even in high school, when I gave the commencement address there, uh, I quoted from Thoreau: "If you've built castles in the air, that's where they should be. Now put foundations under them." I've always tended to have lofty goals. Louis Grizzard is an author there in Atlanta with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, wrote a lot of books, great titles in the books. They were funny as could be. He even had a TV show for a while, died way too young. But my favorite book of all was titled Shoot Low, Boys, They're Riding Shetland Ponies. And I felt like we were always tending to shoot too low. We needed to aim high. Now, Jim Collins nailed it when he called them the BHAGs, the bold, audacious goal, hairy, audacious goals. Uh, well, I didn't come up with that term, but I had bold goals. My belief is that you need to set lofty goals and recognize you won't necessarily achieve them all, but by setting them, you'll get further along than if you set easily achievable goals.
Yep.
And so I've just tended to be that way. It took a while for staff to recognize that I'm never pleased, but they didn't realize that I'm often pleased. I'm sorry, they didn't recognize I'm never satisfied. I'm often pleased, but never satisfied. I believe we can always do better. And with the students that I would have, I don't think I could set goals for those students that they couldn't achieve. I, Now, there are going to be some who won't, but that was because they chose not to. They had the ability to. It's not about your ability. It's about your attitude. It's more about, do you want to? Are you willing to work hard? And that's the thing. It's not about kids' grades in my class weren't based on their IQ. It was based on their attitude, their desire to succeed. Because if they would come to class, if they would pay attention, they're going to do just fine. But it's amazing how many would spend thousands of dollars to go to this concert and then decide, oh, it's raining, I think I won't go. Well, instead of the concert, it was my class, that they would just want to sleep in and miss the class or something. So I thought, how can I get them to want to come? So I did a silly thing. It was based on 1 Minute Manager. When I read that, I thought, so I'd hand out index cards and I would put on one side, tell me what's the most important thing you learned today, and tomorrow, what would you like for me to talk about next time? Well, it didn't take, I wasn't even 2 weeks into the semester, and they weren't putting anything about the course. They wanted to know all about life. Are you married? How'd you meet your wife? Do you have children? What kind of car do you drive? Are you a Democrat or Republican? Do you really know the Clintons? How much money do you make? I mean, all of these kinds of things. And then one day, a student asked a different question had not been asked before. What's the best advice you could give us? And I said, to thine own self be true. Just quoting Shakespeare. I said, when each of us is born, we're a big piece of granite. And every thought, every word, every action in our journey through life is chipping away at that block of granite. I said, I know that in my class, you can cheat and you could probably get away with it. And it breaks my heart. Not that you're going to cheat and get away with it, but rather that you're going to cheat. Because at the end of the semester, you're going to have defined who you are. You're a cheater. And when you graduate from this university, you've already done it. You can't just click a switch and say, today I'm going to be an honest person or I'm going to be a dishonest person. You're shaping your character. You're shaping who you are. And when you look in the mirror and you look deeply into your eyes, do you like what you see? Do you like who you are? Because it's important that you recognize what you're doing with these actions you're taking right now as a student in my class. I said I had a consulting company and I had two partners in the company. Hugh Kinney was the best consultant I've ever been around. He was the foundation on which we really built that company. I was the rainmaker. But one day Hugh came to me and he said, John, I've decided I've got to leave. There's a group in California that's offered me a partnership and it's going to set me up financially for the rest of my life. And I think for my family, it's what I need to do. I said, Hugh, I hate it, but I understand. I want what's best for you. But Kevin, I wondered, for a week, I had a hard time sleeping. I thought, what are we going to do? Can we survive this? And then Hugh came to me and he said, John, I've changed my mind. I'm staying. I said, great. What caused that? He said, I had a vision. I said, what? He said, well, some people would say it was a dream, but it was a vision. I could see it was just like I was in a movie. He said, there was this barge. It was painted black. Everyone on it was dressed in black. And you and I were standing at the dock. And as it began to move away, at the last minute, I jumped to be on that dock. And when I looked back, you were standing there and your hand was out. I jumped back to be with you. I said, well, what's this about, Hugh? He said, those guys on that barge would be my partners. They cheated on their wives. If they would cheat on their wives, I knew they'd cheat on me. And I know what kind of person you are. And I looked at the class and I said, to thine own self be true. Because that granite that you're sculpting is going to be your tombstone. What do you want your real legacy to be in life? So, those kinds of things would come from just that little index card. And it just, I don't know, that's all of that is kind of built into me. And so then when I would teach this leadership course, one kid said, Dr. White is every student's grandfather. And so they'd come to see me about everything. I'd have boxes of tissues there for them when they'd come. And I tried to tell them that, there's from where you are now to where you're going to be, it's not a single path through the matrix to get there. There are multiple paths. Just enjoy the journey. Don't worry so much about the destination, because the destination's going to work out just fine. I got way off the subject there, Kevin.
That's okay, John. Here's the feedback that Maria says. She says, a few minutes of listening to you are so worthy. A way to go can listen to you for hours. So there you go. I had a whole bunch of things I was going to ask you, but as I look at our time, I've got, before the questions I will always ask, I've got one other one for you. You've been in the workplace and you've been in the world of leading for, as I said at the beginning, 6 decades. And I think you and I would both agree, and I having read the book, I'm confident we would agree that more about leadership is the same than is changing, that the principles of being a practical leader aren't really changing, and yet the world does continue to change. So I'm curious your thoughts about what is it that we as leaders today maybe ought to be more aware of, or make sure we don't forget, or focus on today?
Well, it gets back to what I call the secret sauce of leadership. It starts with listening. I think listening is the thing that, Steve Sample in his book, The Contrarian Guide to Leadership, said everybody thinks they're great listeners. Well, they also think they're great drivers, but he said all these things wrong. We think we're great listeners, but we can always do better this job of listening. Um, and I shouldn't quote from the Broadway show Hamilton, because then I'd get into trouble about I need to get the pay for the rights to quote from there. But Aaron Burr says to Alexander Hamilton, "Smile more, talk less. Speak less, smile more." It's listen, and that's the thing I think that it I still struggle with that about, because often I'm thinking about what I want to say when you stop talking, but just listen. And I don't mean listen to the words, I mean listen deeply. Go inside that person. What is it they're really trying to say? Look at the body language. The biggest thing is care for the people you lead. Care about them, love them. It's listen, learn, love, and then lead. Um, Now, Teddy Roosevelt is given the credit for this, but there's no record that he actually said people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. But it's true. You need to let the people you're leading know that you care about them. I mean, deeply care about them, that you love them. Students in my class were often shocked when I would make a point of saying, "I want you to know something. I love you. I love you." Kevin, the difficulty and the tragic part about that is some of those students had never heard those words.
Never heard that before. Yeah, that's true.
Never.
That's true. Yeah.
And I think it's to let people know why you're doing this. Leadership is not about you. It's about those people you lead. It's about them. That's why I've said my goal is not to be the best leader, it's to be the leader of the best team. That the focus needs to be on the team, not on the leader. What can I do to serve you, to help you achieve your goals in life? And if it's to get another job for you, let me help you do that.
Right.
I would like to think I'm creating an environment in which you're enjoying what you're doing. Because when I laid out the things, my list of my expectations of you and my promises, my commitments to you with my vice chancellors as chancellor, the bottom line on the list was have fun. Let's have fun at what we're doing. If it's not fun, then I'm not achieving my goal as a leader. You have to enjoy being in it.
John, you had no idea that was my next question. My next question is not necessarily at work, although it's clear that you enjoyed your work. What do you do for fun, John?
Great question. I enjoy, my wife and we work puzzles. In fact, for Christmas, we got 7 puzzles. We just finished up the 7th one. We work puzzles together. But I play golf. I'm terrible. I'm just awful at golf, but I play. I take my frustrations out on that little ball. I love to read, listen to music. I love being with family, love being around people. But my son called me after I had, quote, retired, and he said, "What are you doing, Dad?" And I said, "Well, I'm getting my stuff ready for the online course I'm teaching for the university." He said, "Dad, you're supposed to be retired. Don't you realize that you worked all these years to be able to get to the point where you can do what you enjoy doing?" I said, "John, I benefited because I got paid for these 60 years for doing what I enjoy doing." And I said, "It's not been work for me. I get paid for what I like to do." And the teaching is, I love that. And mostly it's about being with people, responding to their questions, trying to help them. But that's where I have fun. But I have fun. I'm having a lot of fun being with my wife now. She paid the price for a lot of my successes by taking over the heavy responsibility of raising our kids and all, but I just like life. You know, I long ago I realized that if that day was my last day on earth, I had no complaints. Every day since then has been extra icing on the cake. It's just been really special. Um, I had a near-death experience early in my marriage, and it's kind of changed the way I viewed things. Then I got to a point where it was turned to, I went reverted. It was all about me, my, and mine. And then I was sitting in my office and looking at all the awards and the stuff on the walls, and I thought, is this all there is to it? Then I realized, Kevin, that I wanted my net worth not to be measured in dollars and cents, but rather in lives impacted, and realized that's what I could do in teaching. And then I also recognized leading is teaching and teaching is leading. That every leader is teaching, whether they know it or not. They're teaching people. They're sending messages, and yet every teacher is also leading. And too few of our teachers today, I think, recognize the huge responsibility they have because they are a leader for those people in their
100%.
rooms.
Yeah,
And
100%.
it's not all about the subject matter, that kids are not paying so much attention to the subject matter as they are to the leader. Is that leader going to be a role model? Is it going to be someone I want to be like? Or is it going to be someone that I know I could do better than that particular person? Bad leaders, you can learn possibly more from them than you can from good leaders. But I try to be a good leader.
You hinted at one of the things that you like to do is to read. And the only question you knew I was going to ask you is this. So, what's one thing, John, that you're reading right now?
Well, in fact, you're going to be a little surprised, I suspect. It's David Rosenfeld's book, and it's fiction. And it's one that he writes. He writes the funniest books you could ever imagine. I love his books. David Rosenfeld, and
The title is
I've got two of them going right now, and it's a recent one. It's about chow down. It's about a chow. David Rosenfeld and his wife, they do rescue dogs, and they do uh, those. And so all of his books, the ones that with Andy Carpenter, you want to read the Andy Carpenter series, and if you can start with the beginning one, do that. And read particularly the acknowledgments at the end of the book. It's the funniest thing I think I've ever read. And I'm reading. I would walk, and while I walk, I read. In fact, people around here they think I'm crazy because I'm out and I'm walking, reading a book, and they say, "How do you do that?" Well, I just walk and I just read, and I'm laughing out loud as I'm reading Rosenfeld's book. So this is Chow Down.
All right, awesome. So the next book that you all might want to read is called Why It Matters. It's John's book, Reflections on Practical Leadership. You've gotten a hint of it today because while John talks about a lot of the people that came through his class as guests, and while he talks about a lot of lessons from from others that he's read, he talks a lot about who he is, and you got a good sense of that today. And if you've enjoyed today, I hope that you'll say thank you if you're watching live, and say thank you in the comments. And I hope that whether you're watching live or not, that you buy a copy. And so there's where people ought to go, right? JohnAWhiteJr.com/why it matters.
Yeah. And interestingly, I know we're running out of time. When I submitted the manuscript, it would have been a 625-page book. So I took half of it out and I put the half on the website that's not in the book. And to get to that, on page 287 in the book is the password to get to the bonus material that's out there. So
no, we're not going to give it to you today, everybody. But you're going to want to go get your copy. Now I have a question before we say goodbye. Before I say goodbye to John, I have a question for all of you. And if you've been with me before, you know the question I'm about to ask you, because you've been with us for nearly 40 minutes. And you may have found this interesting, enjoyable, fun. That's great. I hope all those things are true. But the real question is, now what? What action will you take as a result of this? Because if it was just entertainment, you probably would have been better off reading Rosenfeld than listening to John and I. You came here to work on your ability to be a more effective leader, to understand what it means to lead a little bit more and a little bit differently. And none of that will matter unless you take some action. So the question is, what is it that you got from this? Maybe it's that I want to think about being pleased but not satisfied. Maybe it's to think about my own work and life balance. Maybe it could be any number of things that we talked about. Maybe it's that you realize that while you think you are a good listener, that you know you could be a better listener. It could be anything. The question is, if you don't take some action on having been here today, what's the point? So, John, thank you so much for being here. We got thank yous coming in all over. My last count was, I think, 12 countries, people joining us. John, thanks for being here. It was a pleasure to have you. And to all of you who are listening, whether you're with us live or listening with us later, I hope that you'll be back again for another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.